Okay, my heart is burdened to finish the reading of this letter by a former elder in the church in Taipei named Larry Chi. It is a little hard to read because there is a lot of abbreviation of words, so I'm trying to do my best to read it correctly. There also are the redaction of names. It says at the beginning, names were removed at the request of a forum administrator in 2003. So this was his account that I guess was posted on a forum, and names were removed in 2003. Okay, page 12. The third period is from 1975 to 1985. In this period, many people came to serve the Taipei church, and many of the elders are still serving the church today, so there is no need for me to say too much. I only bring up a few points here. One, since the family fellowship was dismantled in 1975, there was a period for about a year and a half the Taipei church activities were close to being paralyzed. There were very few formal gatherings and there was very little activity. Two, because of a strict limit laid down by Mr. Lee, many of the church members and deacons dared not do much of anything for a very long period of time. First, blank. They led a fellowship to read a book left behind by Ni every Monday night. This was probably the only activity left. Three, after a long period of paralyzing, the church financials became more and more difficult, so the two elders appointed by Lee began to communicate with deacons in different churches and suggest them to start some of the fellowship and worship with church members. During that time, even though at that time there was very little activity, there were many day-to-day functions that needed to be taken care of. The two elders, blank and blank, were very busy trying to take care of the many day-to-day activities, but there was very little service provided to the community and very little gospel that was going around. 4. During early 1977, there was a decree made to have an internal special gathering in Taipei. Blank appointed several young people to help organize this meeting. His people worked together and prayed together and communicated and had fellowship, and they also invited more people from the working ranks to come forward to serve the church. They called several working saints meetings to exchange ideas among themselves. With the blessing of the Lord, there are many older members as well as younger members stepping forward to join them and help organize this coming meeting. After this special meeting, the members from blank blank and all other places that heard about what happened in Taipei, they came to Taipei to learn their experience and have fellowship with people in Taipei. So not only the Taipei church, but all the churches in all other parts of Taiwan saw new light and started to recover from the paralyzing situation. The Lord gave us guidance to establish 18 spiritual service items and allow the church members the opportunity to participate in the new movement of service. The participation of the 18 special service items was not limited to the young people who had full-time day jobs only. Every item had some working young people coordinating. They invited every worker in the church, young and old, to join in the service fulfillment. So the function of these service items are really not for serving ones only. They also cover education, achievement, caring, and bringing in of new members. This gives every member the opportunity to fulfill what he wished to accomplish in the church. Since the family fellowship was outlawed now, the members used the assembly hall as a place to gather. They worshiped and fellowshiped there, and also used the assembly hall to exercise, to carry out all kinds of activities, learning experiences, and receiving people from out of town. And it was the center for their church life and construction. From that point on, whenever the church wanted to construct a new assembly hall, they always had that kind of thinking in mind to build a building for multi-purpose, and all the members joined in to have a morning exercise and morning Bible reading and share ideas and share fellowship and witness, as well as they were singing songs and really enjoying being together. In the summer of 1977, some of the church members went to the U.S. to participate in the summer camp, maybe summer training, I don't know. And during the summer camp, they had a demonstration of what they did. This was well received by all the people in the camp. In the past many years, all the church members looked down at the church members from the East. These members from Taiwan were invited to visit many churches in the U.S. and were well received, and their experience excited the members in many places they visited, built on the foundation of the morning program. All kinds of activities in Taipei church became more and more dynamic and brought in many new ideas. So people came into the congregation and started to increase. The assembly hall used to be rather empty. It now became more and more crowded again. 5. We can tell as the members were preparing for this 1977 special gathering. Before the gathering, the Taipei church really started this new movement and created a bright picture of reconstruction. Many working young people have this desire to serve the church, to serve the Lord. It was not because of anyone's order. It was just because the Lord gave them the incentive to come forward to serve. And we can see that in today's Taipei church, as well as the church in all different parts of Taiwan. Many elders, or even some of the U.S. church leaders, were brought up during this time period. After the October 1977 special gathering in Taipei, this is number 6, there were about a dozen new full-time co-workers who joined the ranks. At the same time, there were almost 100 church members who took the challenge to move out to the small villages, the countryside, where there was no church assembly, and they went out there to spread the gospel and try to establish a new assembly in the countryside. Our church members were very supportive to their activities. They provided them special prayers as well as financial resources. Within a short time, there was a collection of over $2 million for this purpose. Everybody thought this was a renaissance of the Taiwan churches, especially the Taipei church, under the principle of strengthening the internalization and expanding outward for the new territory and move forward. But it very surprisingly did not turn out the way it was supposed to. First, blank blank made an announcement to disband the 18 special purpose items. They forbade anybody to call any gathering for this purpose. This announcement was to follow the instructions from Lee, because Lee was afraid this 18-item movement would create a new organization, which was not something to his liking, because not too long ago, Max of the Anaheim Church was under the control of Lee and had used his idea to develop a church organization and system layout, and this layout created a big fiasco. So Lee was afraid the Taipei church, this 18 special service item, may end up being something similar. But actually, the Taipei and Anaheim situations were quite different. They had different purposes. Taipei was to promote service and construction, and Anaheim was to emphasize established power and position. Taipei was purely for service. Anaheim was for administration. Lee did not take time to try to understand what Taipei was really doing. He just used his own subjective viewpoint and made his arbitrary decision. Blank blank did not think through much either. They did not communicate, talk things over with the church members in Taiwan. They took the order and just went ahead and executed it. Because of the paranoia of Lee, the new movement of construction and growth of Taipei church was cut off, and Taipei was back into the paralyzing status. When the Max incident happened in the U.S. in 1978, Lee had to find a way to stabilize the internal organization, and the first thing he did was to stop all growth for outside activity. For anybody to work with Lee, you had to say what he says and do what he dictates. When Lee gave instructions to stop all growth activities, blank blank immediately stopped the church work for the Taiwan countryside. At that time, there was a special collection for this activity, almost in the sum of $1.8 million. It was supposed to be dispensed to different places for different functions. All of a sudden, it was frozen. For those people who worked out in the countryside in the field, they didn't know what to do. So the whole situation was just bad, and the gospel movement was abruptly stopped. Under the circumstances, the church co-workers tried very hard to promote the work toward the youth, as well as to improve the coordination between young people and older church members. And many times the number one assembly hall reception facility was used to hold many short-term training classes for 2 to 3 days, up to 1 to 2 weeks. This way there was the chance to bring in some new blood into the church. Also, the church would try very hard to increase the effort for the gospel in families, in schools, within the church assembly, to try to hold as many gatherings as possible. Many new people did come into the church, but because there was no family fellowship to keep the continuity and hold them together, a lot of people came into the church and slowly drifted away. During the year of 1979, blank blank made repeated requests to Lee and was approved for 5 more brothers to become church elders so they could share some of the load from blank blank. The church elders and deacons got together to talk about the possibility to increase the fellowship among church members as well as the gospel work, but they just couldn't find a possible solution because the family fellowship was outlawed by Lee. He also forbade people to hold small assemblies at a local basis because that was against his principle. Under these circumstances, it was very difficult to move forward with the church work. In 1980, there were more and more new young people coming into the church, and there was the need to give them proper training to grow. Otherwise, without the proper training, it would be easy to lose them. At that time, many co-workers made another mistake. There was the need to ask for help from the outside. So with the permission from Lee, the Taipei elders wrote a letter to Titus Chu, to come to Taipei to handle the training. Even though there was some unpleasant experience in the past, the brothers thought that Chu seemed to have done a decent job in Cleveland in the U.S. Since 1974, there was a period of about 7 to 8 years. Chu had probably grown and changed and become more matured and experienced. That is the reason they invited him to come back and hold another training class. In 1980, the training started in May. Most of the people participating were the Taipei church, and other churches across Taiwan selected the young and bright and energetic people to come forward. There were a few trainees that came from Hong Kong and other Southeast Asian countries. There were a total of about 200 people. Under the leadership of blank and blank, the Taipei church and blank and many others, they support this training class to the fullest extent possible. They provide anything and everything which are required by the training class: resources, money, supplies. During the first half of the year, everything went very smoothly, but during the second half, Titus Chu started to show his old colors again. He started to use a lot more sarcastic comments, as well as curse co-workers who supported his training activities. He even yelled and screamed at blank and blank. Everybody started to get mad at him again. Some of the church elders tried to step forward and maintain the peace, so the training class was completed as originally planned in about a year's time. In 1981, under the urge of the brother blank, Taiwan started the training of the Bible reading video recordings. I believe that's the semi-annual trainings. At that time, we hoped this was a good way to help the church members to receive the gospel as well as to accept the teachings from Lee. We tried to establish video recording trainings and a service center in Taipei. Because of this training center, we started to make contact with the deacon office. We were very careful in making contact with Living Stream Ministry because we heard from other sources it was not easy to deal with Living Stream Ministry. It is very easy to violate a lot of rules and regulations, but after several contacts, we learned that the person in charge of the Living Stream Ministry was a person with serious mental deficiencies. He liked to push people around, and he made unreasonable demands, which was a lot worse than what you got from the worst criminal. It seemed to be totally out of character to have such a person in charge of the Living Stream Ministry. The only reason this could happen and exist in the congregation is because his father is Witness Lee. Lee started the Bible reading training in the U.S. as early as 1974, but Taiwan didn't pick it up for a long time. One of the main reasons is because how much to charge for the training. Before the video recording training and service center was established in early 1981, Lee, on one occasion in the living room in front of blank and blank, he told several elders from Taipei Church that the money collected at the training center was to be used to pay for the equipment and materials only. The money may also be used for church expansion and improvement in the future. When the church elders came back to Taiwan and relayed this message from Lee, how the money was going to be used, to the rest of the church members, because the fees collection during the training was to be used for God's word, many members were happy to pay the money and took part in the training. But the training center had only one paid staff member. All the rest of the people working at the training center did not charge anything. They were all volunteers because they thought they did this just for the Lord and to serve the other church members and the church. But 1 year later, all of a sudden, Blank received a phone call from Lee, and Lee wanted him to go to the training center and withdraw a large sum of money and give the money to his son. But when Blank looked at the books at the training center, there was only about 600,000 Yankee dollars left at the training center. That was far short of the 2 million demanded by Lee. And the brother who was in charge of the training center also reminded Brother Blank that way back when Mr. Lee said in his LR how the money collected at the training center was going to be used. It was to be used only for the church work and not supposed to be used for any personal expenditures. Later on, the money was not withdrawn and handed over to Witness Lee's son because what was available and what was demanded was a very big gap. But the people at the service center were very disappointed to learn that there was such a demand to use the money improperly. After a while, the people in charge of the training center resigned because he felt he was being fooled. This phone call also woke up quite a few church members. People started to notice that Lee might not handle the church finances in an ethical manner. Also, we heard many similar stories along this line. In 1983, the Taipei Church did not have the fortune to move forward smoothly from here on out. In addition to the requirement for support of blank from blank to Taipei, the church elders also required Lee to allow blank to move from the Bay Areas in California to assist blank as well. Blank had sent his respect to blank as he moved to Taipei. He asked Lee to allow blank to join him in Taipei church. So Lee called blank to ask him to go to Taipei to work. Before he went to Taiwan, he stopped by Anaheim to visit Lee, and Lee gave him some instructions. When Chu arrived in Taiwan, he considered himself to be the special envoy from Lee, and he was the only spokesperson to speak for Lee. He was arrogant and demanding. The people around him just couldn't believe there could be anybody who served the Lord who would have this type of style and attitude. When Chu arrived in Taiwan this time, he had special instructions from Lee. He didn't pay any attention to blank, blank, and blank. He considered them to be old, outdated, and incapable of doing anything. He looked down on all the rest of the church co-workers. He often badmouthed the other people's work, and he enticed a small group of young people to become his personal aide and to form a clique. And there were a couple church elders who used to prevent him and talk to him in private and try to correct some of his talk and his actions. But Chu didn't recognize that advice and in turn called those church elders bad names. Things were getting so bad, the church elders collectively wrote a letter to Lee and told him what happened. So Lee called Chu and told him to go back to Cleveland. It was very sad that a servant of the Lord could allow his personal desire for power and position to overshadow his better senses. 16 After Chu left Taiwan in 1984, blank, blank, blank led the co-workers and elders to work together and build up the church work in all directions. Mr. Chu was responsible for the training and grooming of many more young professors. Lu led the mature church members, and co-workers and deacons led the whole church membership to strengthen the caring and gospel among members and families. Given a little time, the church was on its way to much bigger and better things. Lee decided to visit Taiwan in the fall of 1984, and many church members had high hopes for this visit because with a little help from him, the church could be brought up to the next higher level. 17. It seems things don't always work out the way people wish. During the first meeting he called with Taipei, he started to assault various church co-workers. He called them stupid and discredited and abused them so people could tell something bad was coming. Mr. Lee said in 1960, as he left Taiwan, he left a big fortune for the church. But unfortunately, this fortune was all wasted by the senior co-worker. In the past 25 years, nothing was accomplished. So that is the reason after he completed the New Testament Bible training in the U.S. during the summer of 1984, he decided to come to Taiwan to shake things up a little. In another meeting with the coworkers, also in attendance, he described Tai Chi as a good exercise for health, and he gave some demonstration. But after the meeting, he required blank to quietly tell blank not to come to elders' co-workers meetings anymore. Again, another elders and co-workers meeting, he said two things. One, Lee said if he was going to form a political party, he was going to fire all the elders and co-workers because this group was totally useless. Number two, if he was going to form a party, he was going to get rid of all the people in attendance so he could go out and hire new soldiers and buy new horses and form an army to fight for him. In many other gatherings, he repeatedly talked about elders and coworkers who have wasted the church property away and they did not accomplish anything, and everyone ought to be fired. It was quite clear that his intent was to fully take over the Taipei church. The elder in the Taipei church took his message, and before Lee went back to the U.S. in the winter, there were at least 4 elders who resigned from the church. 18. In the spring of 1985, when Lee came to Taipei again, Lee started his move to restructure Taipei Church. He pushed all the experienced elders who were experienced, knowledgeable, and knew what to do, and he pushed them aside. On the other hand, he established 40-some new elders at 21 assemblies. His new group of elders were usually senior members in the church. Some of them were deacons. They were quite capable people. The reason Lee set up his new group of elders, it was a window dressing tactic. He wanted to make things look good, but actually he did not respect them much and had no intention to give them responsibility. I can show you with the following points. 1, he called this group of elders baby elders. The group of elders had been with the church, with many churches. They served the church and had taken on many different responsibilities for many years. There was no reason to insult them and call them babies. 2, when he gathered this group of new elders, he told them he was not going to appoint any leader among this group of elders. And if they need to decide on anything, they need to get together and build a consensus. On the other hand, he said that if he was not in Taiwan and if the church needs to make important decisions, they should all get him on the phone and get instructions from him about what to do. In other words, he really did not want to give his group of elders any authority or responsibility to do anything for the church. He just treated them as babies. 3, in the fall of 1985, he brought over a group of young people from the U.S., and got them to take over the control of the Taipei church. This group of people included his son, Philip Lee. He used this group to control and manipulate the Taipei church, and also he managed the finances of the church, sometimes moving some of the money into his own pocket. 19, from the fall of 1985, since this group of young people from the U.S. took over the control of the Taipei church, from this point it is not that Lee only cut off the limbs of the Taipei church. He also took out the spine, and this last straw was to take out the brain of the Taipei church, and this concludes the 3rd period of Taipei history. The 4th period, from 1985 to 1990. Over the years, many members of the church thought Lee was a man of the Spirit, and many thought that Lee has built the congregation, the church, and that Lee contributed much to the church work and the gospel. So they tended to give all the credit and glory to Lee, but this is not correct. It is not true. The church went through many ups and downs in the past 40 years, much darkness cheating and sin has occurred in the last 5 years since 1984 when Lee came back to Taiwan. And we all really should repent and let the Lord show us the way. Let us see his light and the truth. Before we start to describe what happened in Taipei since 1985, let us first take a look at how the congregation, the church, developed the history of the church in the last 25 years. Only then we could have a better understanding of Lee's character and working style and how he did his work, how he changed, and how he developed. We need to understand the background when he went to Taipei and also the true object of his going to the Far East. Without looking at the history and development of the church in the U.S., we cannot fully understand how Lee was in the 1950s and how Lee changed to what he is in 1985 and beyond. Section 3, the church's development and history in the United States. Section 1, way before Lee arrived in the U.S., there were many other Chinese men who started the congregation church work in the U.S. as early as 1950. For instance, there was a co-worker of Brother Nee whose name is Blank. He had started an assembly in New York, in D.C., and in San Francisco. New York had the largest number of people attending. They used both English and Chinese in their assembly. The English-speaking members and the Chinese-speaking members worked together very well. Blank knew Chinese and English very well, so he often provided translation work in New York, D.C., and San Francisco. He also participated in many local family fellowships. He helped to set up a language center and translate and publish some of the lectures and writings put out by Brother Nee. Many Western members have read his publications and benefited from them a great deal, and they respect Nee very much. Section 2, in 1958, Lee accepted an invite from Sparks and went to England for a visit. On the way to England, he passed through the U.S. Blank gave him a very warm welcome and took him to New York, D.C., and San Francisco to meet many church members and sometimes invite him to conduct an assembly meeting. Blank served as a translator for him and translated his talk into English. Lee met John Ingalls on this trip. At that time, John Ingalls was in L.A. and participated in the Westmoreland congregation, which had some influence from Sparks. In 1958, Blank immigrated from China to the U.S. He was the brother of the wife of Nee. And, of course, they knew the way of the church very well. After Chang and his wife arrived in L.A., they also joined the Westmoreland congregation. That is how Ingalls and Chang got to know one another. They had frequent fellowship and also family fellowship together. They had much communion and communication between them. Section 3. In 1960, Lee had a major business failure. At that time, his heart was very heavy. He knew he had made a very serious mistake, and he had to give up a very good diamond and come to the U.S. and come to a place that he was not totally familiar. The reason he left Taiwan is not because people drove him away. His conscience could not allow him to stay in Taiwan anymore, and he could not face many of the church members and co-workers who put their trust in him. When he first arrived in the U.S., he stayed in San Francisco as well as in Seattle. Many Chinese-speaking church members welcomed him with open arms. At that time, his English was rather cold or awkward. He had to have people translate for him. The church members didn't mind. They helped him to establish in the U.S. He spent most of his time in Seattle during that period. Section 4. During May of 1962, Mr. and Mrs. Ingalls and Mr. and Mrs. Blank and some other church members who used to get together in Westmoreland's congregation started to have assemblies in their home at the Blank. There were about 20 people participating. This was the beginning of the L.A. church. In August of the same year, they invited Lee to L.A. to conduct special meetings, and he made a good impression on them and their assembly. Especially, Lee thought Ingalls' language skills were very good. So in November of the same year, he decided to move from Seattle to L.A. and join this group to work together. In June of 1962, they collaborated to establish the Flow magazine by Lee. I think it's the Stream, maybe magazine, by Lee, Ingalls, and Chang, and to start to publish the Stream of youth and also write some of the English hymns. Section 5. For the first few years, there was very little progress in the church work. The assembly people had very little increase, but because of the publication of the stream of youth, some of the articles carried a very high standard. So some people would read the work of Brother Nee and started to pay attention to the stream of youth. The books and writings by Nee were originally in Chinese. Most of them were translated by Blank and published by Christian Fellowship Publications in New York. When some of the church members learned that Lee had the chance to work with Nee in China, they started to ask Lee to join them in fellowship. For the first few years, Blank usually had the translation responsibility to go out with Lee. During this time, there were quite a few good members and co-workers joining them. These include Bill Mallon, Bill Freeman, and James Barber, who have since passed away. They had very strong verbal abilities. Through the fellowship with some English-speaking members, a good deal of them were helped to see the spirit and the truth in the Bible. In 1968, they already reached a church membership of about 200. They also got a chance to buy Eldon Hall. That became the #1 assembly hall. The summer of 1968, about 160 church members from the U.S. and Canada went to Taipei and participated in international special meetings, and they witnessed the progress in the Taiwan churches and learned a great deal from them. When they came back to the U.S., they started to build and expand the church function and build up the L.A. church rapidly. The church membership reached 600 to 700 by 1970. They started to expand into other cities and towns and make more church assemblies. Through 1973, this is the most rapid expansion of congregational churches in the U.S. and Canada. The author of this book arrived in the U.S. for about 1 year in 1973. He went to many cities to visit various churches. I was very surprised to find out that often Lee would try to squeeze out Chang in many places. Ever since Lee arrived in the U.S. in 1960, Chang invited Lee to New York to conduct special meetings almost every year, but the church that Lee associated with never invited Chang to participate in any function because Lee was very afraid that Chang would overshadow his work. Lee would often badmouth Chang in front of the brothers and leaders in various churches. He said Chang did not follow the paths of the church and tried to lay many trumped-up charges on Chang. At that time, there were some church members who used to be in Chang's congregation. They listened to what Lee said about Chang and left Chang to join Lee, but Chang never complained to Lee, nor said anything. He always did what he used to do and served the Lord and the church as always. Section 6. While many congregational churches enjoyed the rapid growth in 1973, Lee again initiated a bright idea of making money to try to get rich quick, so he initiated his Daystar Project around many American congregational churches. He suggested to build mobile homes to make money, so he himself made many presentations to the church Sunday assemblies. He showed his plan and said this project was a sure bet to make money because he had the blessing of the Lord, and it was a sure bet to make a lot of money very quickly. And the money made is for the good of the church, and with a lot of money we could build more churches and expand the gospel. His idea was to use the money resources from the church mainly to build up his own business empire. Lee also asked other people to promote his idea and asked the church members either to invest or loan money to the Daystar Project. Many church members, without much thinking and believing what he said, put their life savings into the project, and they thought this project was blessed by the Lord, so there was nothing to be afraid of. So many English-speaking church members jumped in. On the other side, the Chinese-speaking church members were much more conservative, and only a few people joined in. Lee communicated with the church in Taipei and other Far East churches in the Philippines and in Singapore, but the church members in Taipei and in other Far East churches held the ground that there would be no business talking in the church assembly, so there was no church formally part of his project. Fortunately, because of our disposition, none of the church members in Taiwan were involved in this fiasco. Also, because of this is why Lee thought or said church members in Taiwan are old and outdated and could not follow his rapid forward movement. Section 7, in the spring of 1974, the Mideast War erupted, and there was a global oil crisis. The price of the oil shot up sky high. At that time, the Daystar Project just completed with production of the factory and had begun producing the mobile homes. As soon as the products came out, there was no market to buy the products. At the same time, because of bad management, hiring of the wrong people to operate the factory, in a very short period of time, all the investment was down the drain and everybody lost their whole investment. All the church members who participated lost their life savings. Lee was clueless as to how to face the investors and church members. At that time, Max went around on behalf of Lee, talking to investors as well as church members, and asked them not to pursue Lee and try to recover their investment, and asked them not to sue Lee. That is the main reason why Lee was very grateful to Max and asked him to hold many important functions in his blank in the future. Because of his financial failures, the Congregational Church in the U.S. was dealt a surreal blow, and the morale of all the church members dropped to the bottom, and much of the church work was also negatively impacted. Section 8. After this second business failure, Lee went back to the church and made good use of his verbal skills, and he tried to win back the trust of the church members. He started to promote the trainings, the Bible reading trainings, life study trainings. For one of these, they rented a large building for 10 days to facilitate the training program, as well as to receive a large number of participants. It cost a great deal of money to rent this building. It was too heavy a burden to the LA church and members, and so in order to lighten the load of the church, Lee suggested every training participant pay $50 for the rent, as well as to supplement other expenses for the training session. Unfortunately, this practice opened up a new way to collect money within the congregation. Lee saw this collection as a good way to make big bucks. So in 1974, Lee established the deacon office. On the surface, this office was the responsibility of Ingalls and Chang, but in reality, Lee sent 2 of his sons to manage the financials and the office. One of his daughters-in-law handled the books. The entire operation of this deacon office was thoroughly in the dark. No one knew exactly what was going on. Looking at this personnel arrangement, it was easy to see what was on Lee's mind, but all the church members were very much simple-minded. They did not suspect there was anything evil going on. The number 2 son of Lee was very smart. He devised many money-making schemes. With the support of Lee, there are more and more items and ways to make money from church members, such as selling audio tapes, videotapes, a newsletter, uniforms. It says tithe, but I think he means ties, like men's ties, etc. 1978, the number 2 son of Lee had a lot of power over the local churches. He made the church elders as his, I think, minions or slaves or whatever. They had to answer to him, but there's a blank with question marks. In order to have a large building, in order to accommodate more people for training, Lee suggested that LA members should relocate to Anaheim in 1975. At the same time, he called on church members all over the world to donate money to build a much larger assembly hall and a receiving center and 2 residences of the co-workers in Anaheim. After the completion of the assembly hall and the receiving center and the residence building in Anaheim, the buildings needed to be registered at the county courthouse. Lee suggested that since the construction money was donated by churches and members all over the world, these buildings should not be registered under the Anaheim Church's name. This property does not belong to Anaheim Church alone. Lee registered this property under the name of the Deacon Office. This was a very smart move on his part. Later on, when Anaheim Church needed to use the assembly hall for functions, they had to pay rent to the Deacon Office. Most of the church membership that donated money to build these buildings, they thought it was for the benefit of the church. It was not for the benefit of any particular deacon or deacon office. Later on, Lee often called the deacon office as his private kitchen. He used this as a vehicle to satisfy his own personal needs. Many of the congregational churches became subordinate organizations under his control. Section 10, 1976, Some papers and books that criticized and attacked Lee and the Congregational Church, or the local church, I think that's what it means, the local church, started to show up. Among them, the most influential ones are Mindbenders and Godmen, edition 1. The Mindbenders called Lee and the local church under his leadership a cult. We consider it the same as People's Temple under Smith's in 1972. Later on, there are many other books and papers that discuss the unorthodox religion. They often said this reference and categorized this congregation as a cult. Many church members wrote letters to the publishers and authors of these books to change their position. Some of them accepted and made the changes, and some refused because of the provocation of these books and papers that put many congregants in various places in a very difficult position. The church work and the gospel were greatly impacted by these books. It's not only this situation happening in the US and Canada, it was even worse in Germany and in England. Taiwan was also impacted. At the very end, the church membership had to go through the court to sue the publishers and stop these damages. How could this sort of thing happen? It is all because Lee's words and position and leadership were far from the norm. He had moved away from the proper practice of the church. Section 11. Max did a big favor of Lee, helping him to get out of the financial responsibility in the failure of the mobile home investment scheme. Max moved up to number 2 position in the church hierarchy in 1977. Lee used him as a henchman to take care of people Lee did not like. That included Bill Freeman, John Ingalls, and Blank, who were early church pioneers. John managed to stay on because of his writing skills. In July and August of 1977, Max was in charge of the Bay Area Youth Special Camp in Berkeley. He directed an activity to promote an anti-tradition, anti-cult, anti-culture, anti-morality, I think anti-Christianity activity. The young people did a lot of yelling, jumping, screaming in the church assembly. They criticized the church elders that they were outdated. One of them dressed up as John Ingalls, and many others used water pistols to shoot at him. He was to be executed. Some of them went out in the street and bore signs and placards to denounce the Christian church. They set up a blank bar in the middle of the street to emphasize anti-tradition, culture, and moral position. They drew the objections of many local residents who called the police, and some of the pictures of this riot were collected and used by authors of the book Godmen. Many of the senior church members couldn't stand this anymore and called Lee directly and said it had to stop, and he told Max to hold back some of the activities. Later on, Lee told an audience that nothing was wrong with the activities. The only comment he made was that he went a little overboard. Lee used to think very highly of himself. There are many things he knew that were not proper and should not be done, but he was anxious to do them. He would then try to get someone else to carry them out for him. He would hide behind the scenes in the process. When the results turned out to be good, he would step forward and take full credit. When things turned sour, he would say that he had nothing to do with it and would not take any responsibility. After the Bay Area incident, Lee sent Max to Taiwan to spread the gospel and conduct large-scale meetings. In the following year, Max and the young assistants went around to drive out many senior elders and deacons in many churches who did not agree with him. They went to Germany to try the same game. However, the church members in Germany were much seasoned and principled. They refused to be bullied and made phone calls to Lee to complain. Lee pretended not to know anything about it. He finally fired Max and called him the evil one. In reality, the whole event was a one-stone, two-thirds episode directed by Lee. First, he used Max to smear his critics and get rid of them. These actions were not initiated by Max himself. Lee sent implied messages when Max went ahead to execute them. He used the same tactics on his aides around him all the time. He does not give direct orders, but lets people know what he would like to see done. His flunkies would do things as he wished, and then Lee would distance himself from the bad saints and claim to be innocent. Lee knew Max quite well. After many dirty tricks, he would not allow Max to gather too much power. Lee would get rid of him when it was the right time. There was a middle-aged brother, Lou Blank, It was he who alerted many brothers in Taipei that Li may not be what he seems to be from the outside. Li is a calculating and deep person. Most of the church members are innocent and naive. They failed to see through many of his dirty tricks ahead of time. Similar events repeated many times. People started to wise up. The Max incident deeply damaged the trust among many church members in the U.S. and Canada. Li did not take any responsibility for what happened, let alone apologize to the church. He insisted he was totally innocent. Unfortunately, the events kept coming one after another. In 1979, the church sued the publication and authors of 2 books to clear its name. The lawsuit drug on for 5 years. The lawsuit was because of what Li said and what he did. The church was burdened by him. We never heard that he or the deacon office contributed anything toward legal fees. All the expense was paid for by the church and its members. This kind of lawsuit, Li often incited young people. He let them do crazy things, and he gave it a name, a good name, called spiritual release. This was a big lie. During this lawsuit, blank, Chu, Du, and Lu had quite a few co-workers from Taiwan who left the church and asked them not to go to court and testify versus Li. We might have very well lost the court case if they did testify. Every time there was a court date, Li would ask his 2 sons to leave the U.S. and check into a hospital in Taiwan to avoid being called upon to testify in court. All this maneuvering did cover the eyes of the court and the lawyers on the other side, but the Lord knew the truth well. Li had to be often bragging about winning the lawsuit, but he should have been ashamed of himself. He was the one who dragged the church into it. After Blank lived in the U.S. 1 year, the church had a policy adjustment in 1980. It started to pay attention to the Chinese-speaking church members. Many Chinese-speaking assemblies were established in many large cities where there are many Chinese immigrants. Blank was good at taking care of Chinese-speaking members. He called on brothers in Anaheim and Orange County and showed them how to conduct fellowship and assemblies and how to take care of people and coordinate and serve, include Anaheim, Cerritos, Fullerton, many South LA counties. With cooperation of many members, the congregations were set up in many places and brought in many new members. After 1 year, Li and his 2 sons discovered that the Chinese-speaking church members gave a considerable amount of money to the church, and quite steady as well, and started to think about how they could put all the Chinese-speaking assemblies under the Living Stream ministry. So Li stepped forward past the chief deacon, and he first learned the Chinese-speaking members as incompetent. The progress of the church was way behind. He thought the Chinese-speaking assembly should be under Living Stream Ministry's office. All assemblies should take direct orders from the Living Stream Ministry. Brother Li named his number 2 son as a Chinese department manager, responsible for all Chinese programs from the Living Stream Ministry. He was to be the principal, to bring in all profits from the Chinese-speaking congregants. The church leaders from all the Chinese congregations were under his direct control. It was called coordination between deacons and the deacon office. He applied this doctrine on Chinese congregants first. When there was no strong objection between elders and co-workers, he imposed this approach across the board to cover all the churches. Furthermore, he made an announcement that all the Chinese assemblies in Southern California were to consolidate in Anaheim in the Living Stream Ministry office on Sunday morning to listen to his personal sermons. His attraction and verbal skills increased 350 to over 1,000 members within a year. At that time, most of the Orange County members agreed to come to Anaheim. The members in LA thought it was too much driving, too far, so some senior members did not like to drive a long distance on the freeway, so they did not join them. Because of that, Li was very unhappy. After all the Orange County Assembly was collected in Anaheim, all the collection of assemblies were collected by Deacon's Station. Over the years, the Deacon's Station never published any financial report as to how the money was collected and how it was dispersed. The Deacon's Station continued to erase different reasons they asked the church members to provide more contributions. Quite often, the Chinese assembly elders and co-workers asked the members to change their check from writing to Anaheim Church or other to write to the Living Stream Ministry or the deacon's office. The Living Stream Ministry, because it says the Flow Deacon's office. I think the Living Stream Ministry. Many members were puzzled. They did not understand the difference between the Living Stream Ministry and their own assembly or church. After 1 year, the people going to the Sunday morning service in Anaheim, not only there was no increase, it started to drop below 300. Lee looked at the situation and immediately recognized the saints did not grow quite well, and he withdrew himself and asked that someone else take the morning service. This way he could avoid taking the responsibility and put the blame on other people for the slow growth. After he found a substitute to hold the Sunday morning services, the number of attendees dropped even further. The assembly was very stale and people began to drop out. Not long after, it dropped below 200. There were some members coming from Taipei to visit the Anaheim congregation. They were surprised to see how this gathering was so poor. They even said Lee himself may try to hold people together, but he apparently can't do it. If he couldn't do it himself, how could he be in a position to criticize other churches of not doing well? When things didn't go well, Lee kept changing people and asked different people to take responsibility. This way, many hard feelings were created among church members and co-workers, and whoever did not agree with Lee, he would drive them away. Many people left the Chinese congregation and did not come back for a long time. After another period of time, finally Lee decided to give up the consolidation idea and told different congregants they could assemble in their own church in their own area without coming to Anaheim. From this incident, we can tell Lee was a number one superior teacher, but he was not. Number two, family fellowship was left out by Lee. In the very beginning, Lee started the fellowship in Shanghai, and it was very successful. Since 1954, he liked to use the word training, the new co-workers, the new members, but his training was nothing but letting people listen to his preaching and his sermons. Lee often liked to say how to build the congregation, how to construct, how to build, but he really did not have any ability to let people work cohesively together. He often only just kept the yes man around himself. If anybody criticized or asked questions, he would get rid of him. This kind of experience repeated again and again over many years. By the time of 1985, after many unpleasant experiments and the lawsuit and the morale was low, the finances were in ruins among the Southern California congregations. All the churches in the west of the U.S. and in Canada were in bad shape as well. Looking back, during the first 10 years when Lee first arrived in the U.S., at that time he was new to this foreign land. His English was poor. His business failure in the Far East was still fresh in his mind, so he was humble and polite. He took a low profile to work among the church members to gain people's goodwill. He did not impose any demands on people or keep people from doing things. So at that time, the church had much freedom to do the right things, and they could allow elders and deacons to perform their duties, and the church members could be prosperous according to their own interests and own talent. The church had a chance to grow. During the early years, Lee did not contribute to the growth of the local church, but ever since the 1970s, he started to feel comfortable in his environment. He started to gain power and play politics. He tried to get money into his pocket, and that was very sad. And Lee became a heavy burden and a limitation to the local church. There are several areas for him to be such a negative factor. Lee began to enjoy his own sermons more and more. He began to limit the other co-workers to talk to church members. Only he himself had the privilege to speak to the assembly during special meetings or trainings. He did not want to see anybody else, including Ingalls, give any sermons because he thought that was totally useless, a waste. In this way, he really put a limit on the growth of the church members. Two, he liked to hear from other people to repeat what he said. He considered that to be a repeating, to digest his teaching, so he demanded that all other churches and congregants repeat his teaching, what he said in many assemblies. If people don't follow his instructions to do so, he would suspect that those people would plot against him, and he would find a way to get rid of those people. Ever since 1976, all the churches in the U.S. and Canada and Taiwan, they could only repeat his teaching, his sermons, People were not allowed to have any input, new ideas. 3, the more he gave the sermons, the more he enjoyed it himself. He considered himself to be highly productive. The more he preached, the more the church members had the obligation to listen to him. Every Wednesday and Friday, many church members in Southern California had to go to Anaheim to listen to him, and the co-workers and deacons in various churches had the responsibility to encourage the church members to go to Anaheim to listen to him. So over the years, many church members driving back and forth on the freeway just because they had the obligation to listen to him. For instance, in 1982, there was a brother who had joined the fellowship in Taipei. He said the church members in Southern California had only one responsibility: to go to Anaheim to listen to the chief deacon, probably to the chief apostle. 4, he was the only person allowed to speak in local churches, so he could only hear his own voice, as well as some other church members recite what he said. This made him feel good and feel that he was the only spokesperson for the Lord. Since 1980, he told all church members to listen to him only, no one else. He badmouthed all other church elders and deacons. People should read books only by him. All other publications should be burned. Under this kind of limitation, the church members' minds got narrower and narrower. The church standard dropped. The quality of the test in local churches became lower and lower. 5, the purpose of his sermon and his speeches were for one reason: to make money. The more he said, the more church members had to buy what he just said. They had to buy the audio, video, books, newsletters. Not only did church members have to buy for themselves, they had to buy for others as gifts, and the church elders and deacons became salesmen. They encouraged church members to buy, themselves to buy, to buy, to buy. If they don't help promote, they will be considered negative and will be blamed. So every week, every month, there was more and more merchandise they have to absorb, and many churches ended up owing money to the Living Stream ministry station. Even with repeat encouragement for church members to give and give, many churches just couldn't seem to get out of the debt to the Living Stream ministry. Until 1984, the church membership in Southern California was under a great deal of pressure. For a long time, the church members in Anaheim and entire Southern California were tired. Their pocketbooks were exhausted. The future did not look so good. So Lee understood that the Southern California market was limited. Texas was not much better, so he discovered the market in the Far East, especially Taipei, was good. The fertile ground was over there. Taipei had resources and money to provide, so he and his sons decided to move the Living Stream out of Southern California and go to Taipei. Section 4, many important events happened after 1985. Many events happened in local churches to be presented in later chapters of this book. There's no detailed discussions here to avoid duplication. Only a timetable of some important events is presented here for reference. 1985, at the beginning of the year, Lee arrived in Taipei. He began the restructuring of the Taipei church. He got rid of all the senior elders in the church and assigned 46 new elders, and later on he increased that number to about 80. Lee called them baby elders. He reinitiated family fellowship. He started to push the construction of a large assembly hall and asked people to donate money. He bought a large piece of land in Linkou in great haste. During a summer training in the U.S., he bragged about the restructuring in Taipei, and he required the churches in the U.S. and Canada to follow suit. He really did not have much of an example or life case to show the people in the U.S. how to do it, so the people in the U.S. and Canada canceled the weekly assemblies and did not know how to establish the family fellowship, or I think home meetings. The English-speaking membership started to drop. Most of the people in the U.S. and Canada didn't know what to do. They didn't dare try anything new without Witness Lee's blessing. Toward the end of November, Lee discontinued the centralized Sunday assemblies in Taipei. He in turn told people to plant small groups and to read truth lessons in the reading fellowship, and this practice is to be implemented in all churches across Taiwan. During the winter training in the U.S., he pushed for people to donate money for the large assembly hall in Linkou and asked the members in the U.S. and Canada to give money to the Living Stream Ministry, who was supposed to carry the money to Taipei Church. But later, during a construction moratorium in Linkou, the construction plan for this large assembly hall was stopped. The sum of the money collected at the Living Stream Ministry, the deacon station, was never forwarded to the Taipei churches. The money was not returned to all the members in the U.S. or in Canada either. The deacon never did a report as to how the money was handled. The money just disappeared, and it was millions of dollars. In 1986, there was an elders training in Anaheim. In February, there were 3 major tasks. 1, encourage all churches to implement Sunday morning reading fellowship so he could sell more books on truth lessons. He forbade elders or deacons to give sermons or fellowship during the assemblies. 2, encourage the elders in the U.S. and Canada to go to Taipei to learn and participate in the training and to follow Lee. 3, he initiated a signature drive, that is to show people loyalty to Lee. If people don't sign up, there's going to be consequences. So in turn, about 400 people signed up. They established the Deacon Training Center, the full-time training center in Taipei, in August, and appointed Lee's second son as the manager to be responsible for all training business. The center was to be located in the newly completed number 3 Assembly Hall, and in order to increase the capacity, there was a decision to purchase 11 additional apartment units in the new building. Some of the church members were to contribute some of the money toward this purchase. The money was forwarded through the deacon's office, the Living Stream office. Because of this forwarded money, Lee decided to register all 11 apartment units under the name of the deacon's office instead of to the Taipei church. He initiated a movement to encourage church members to go to Taipei to participate in all kinds of short-term and long-term trainings, and the deacon's office would arrange all the travel for the trainees, and this was a good way of making money. Many church members from the central and south part of Taiwan, as well as U.S. and Canada and the rest of the world, would go to Taipei for the training. There are hundreds of people taking turns. The main theme of the training is on door knocking, door-to-door gospel. There was a slogan which said, in 5 years the gospel should cover the entire Taiwan. In 10 years the gospel would cover the whole world. During the elders' training, a signature drive to show loyalty toward Lee, several hundred elders and co-workers in Taipei, as well as the rest of Taiwan, were forced into signing. To carry out a major remodel in the number 1 Assembly Hall in Taiwan, the entire 4th floor and 6th floor of the building were turned into private residence for Lee and his son, as well as the gospel bookstore office. They set up security guards at the entrance of the number 1 Assembly Hall. The entrance to the building was limited. Members were not allowed to go into the building to have morning fellowship. Many church members complained about this violently, so Lee relented and allowed people to go in to have morning revival, morning fellowship. Lee sent people to Europe to promote the deacon's office or the Living Stream setup and training. He initiated the signature drive in Germany and England. The deacon's office meddled with the internal affairs of the Blackpool Church in England and caused the church to split up. More than 100 members drifted away. The church elders wrote to Lee and asked for his help, who in turn blamed them for not cooperating with the Living Stream Ministry office well, and many other churches in England and Germany heard about this event and were all very angry. There was a fund drive initiated in Taipei for the purchase of land and the construction of a number 6 Assembly Hall. 1987, the door-to-door or door-knocking movement pushed forward in Taipei, the rest of Taiwan in high gear. The deacon's office, Living Stream Ministry, specified that all door-knocking participants had to buy uniforms. There was a large-scale awards ceremony at the China Stadium that good performers in the training were given awards, and also full-time door-to-door members were initiated during the ceremony. They were going to the countryside to do the gospel. The events in the stadium were distributed to all corners of the world for publicity. In the elders and co-workers training in Taipei in early June, Lee emphasized all the deacons, or maybe all the full-timers, had to cooperate with the office, with the Living Stream office, and he promoted his number 2 son and established him as the church leader. He forced many elders and deacons to apologize to his son because some of them did not respect his son very much in the past. Toward the end of June, during the elders' gathering in the U.S., he repeated the same practice. From then on, he made the elders gather while Lee was not there. the gathering was to be conducted by his number 2 son, Philip Lee. His son usually would give direct orders to the deacons and elders. In the summer camp in the U.S., the content was changed to door knocking. At the last minute, all the participants in the camp or in the training were going to combine with some of the church members in Southern California and go out to Orange County to do door-to-door gospel for 10 days. It was claimed that 3,777 joined the congregation, but actually the number was much less than that. Toward the end of August, the members in Rosemead Church were asked to start the door-to-door activities with the Chinese people in Southern California for 10 days. It was claimed that over 1,000 people joined the congregation. In September, Lee used some trumped-up charge to remove blank from the church. I believe that's Don Hardy. The Rosemead church membership was very angry and refused to accept this motion, and this is what is called the Rosemead incident. And from then on, Rosemead Church decided to sever their relationship with Lee and his son. Now, Don Hardy had seen Philip Lee in a fornicating position and then was removed. Immoral acts were at the root of this. At the end of October, there was to be an all-world church membership door-to-door convention in Taipei, but it was postponed due to a typhoon threat. Lee used the arguments that there were a few church members who did not follow their chief leader's instructions well. So he dismissed the brother, and later on the Hong Kong church invited that brother to go to Hong Kong to serve. Some church members started a new congregation in San Francisco. Lee accused them of not obeying him. This created a split among the churches in the Bay Area. In 1988, at the beginning of the year, the sale of the new church VES at a high price began. The profits were in the tens of millions of new Yankee dollars. In March, many publications started to surface in Taipei and the rest of Taiwan to expose the crimes committed by Lee and his son. The board at Rosemead Church signed a formal letter to drive out 2 co-workers sent by Lee. The scandal of Lee's number 2 son hit the news. The elders in Anaheim asked Lee to take action to handle this matter many times, but Lee just dragged his feet and refused to do anything. And because of that, many local churches were in turmoil, and many English-speaking members left. And participation in the local church dropped a great deal. There was an open letter in Taipei Church asking elders to state their position. The elders in Anaheim Church, under the urge of their members, made an announcement of their 16-point statement. Lee was very unhappy about it. In August, the many churches in Germany sent a 4-member delegation to Anaheim to investigate the truth about Philip's scandal. And what was reported in the news was true. In September, many churches in Germany sent a joint letter to Lee and accused him of hiding the crimes committed by Philip Lee for many years. Lee consistently promoted and praised his number 2 son and made him to dictate the activities of all the churches. So Lee was as guilty as his son. So the German churches severed their relationship with Lee in this open letter. In October, the elders in Anaheim announced Lee attacked Ingalls and blank by name in a Pasadena conference assembly. Before Lee left Taiwan to go back to the U.S., he called for a 3-day special assembly, but because of extremely low attendance, Lee made an excuse of ill health and canceled the assembly. This was the very first time a special assembly was canceled in the history of the Taipei Church. The door-to-door movement was a total failure. All the English-speaking full-time trainees were totally withdrawn. In 1989, for the people who participated in the full-time training, the door-to-door movement in Taiwan and the small groups, they went door-to-door with the gospel but did not succeed. Ingalls and 2 other brothers resigned from the Anaheim elders' position. Those brothers would be Al Nock and Godfred Otute. Many Chinese dailies and U.S. news magazines openly reported Lee and his son's scandal in the local church. Lee attacked Rosemead Church by making several announcements. In June, the brother blank published an article entitled Truth, which pointed out classified announcements by Lee that were all lies. The opposite position of these 2 camps was deepened. In August, the first issue of the Word and Testimony newspaper was published. It carried the message from Ingalls and John So. In September, Huntington Beach Church in Orange County, there were two elders who were close to Lee who issued a joint letter attacking another brother, Ken Unger, and accusing him of not following the direction of Lee and wanting him kicked out of the fellowship. In October, the two elders did something similar to other church members, even trying to prevent some members from entering the meeting hall. An assembly of over 200 members dropped to less than 30. In October, Lee tried to swindle 50 million Yankee dollars from Taipei Church, over $2 million US. In November, during the Thanksgiving Special Assembly, Lee openly called 7 co-workers as an internal conspiracy group. He was ready to create a full-scale conflict and split among the local churches and protect his personal interests. As was expected, the turmoil was to continue for a while longer. The loss among the churches and the members would continue to mount. What Lee did contaminated and destroyed the testimony promoted by Ni a long time ago. Larry Chi, former Taipei elder. Heartbreaking.